It is the world's most powerful economic weapon, American oil. Forged in the shale fields of Texas, it rewrote the global energy map, transforming the United States from the biggest consumer into a dominant global supplier, an unstoppable force in world commerce. Then, in April 2025, the weapon backfired. An attempt to punish a foreign adversary triggered a catastrophic collapse, wiping out 94% of U.S. oil exports in a matter of days and pushing its most vital industry to the brink of ruin. How did an attempt to weaponize oil cause America's energy dominance to implode overnight? To comprehend the sheer speed of the 2025 collapse, you must first appreciate the miracle that preceded it. For half a century, America's economy was hostage to foreign oil, its foreign policy shaped by its dependence on OPEC. But then came the shale revolution, a wave of American innovation in hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling unlocked oceans of oil trapped in shale rock formations. This wasn't just drilling, it was a technological triumph that transformed the nation's destiny. The Permian Basin in Texas became the new Saudi Arabia. The U.S. went from being the world's biggest importer to a global energy superpower, exporting millions of barrels a day. This new reality created an era of energy independence and swagger, a golden age where American oil set the price and dictated the terms on the world stage. But this newfound power bred a dangerous confidence. The Trump administration began to view American energy not just as a commodity, but as a primary tool of geopolitical coercion. The strategy of maximum pressure became a hallmark of its foreign policy, using sanctions and economic restrictions to target adversaries like Iran and Venezuela. The underlying assumption was that America's economic might, supercharged by its energy dominance, was so immense that it could bend other nations to its will without suffering significant blowback. The global energy market, however, is a complex and deeply interconnected ecosystem. While the U.S. was flexing its muscles, other players were adapting. China, the world's largest oil importer, began to diversify its sources. OPEC+, the alliance between the traditional OPEC nations and Russia, watched America's rise with concern, waiting for an opportunity to reclaim lost market share. The stage was being set for a major confrontation. A belief was hardening in Washington that it could weaponize its energy exports without consequence, failing to recognize that in the global market, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. The weapon was unleashed on March 24, 2025. President Trump signed Executive Order 14,245, a policy instrument of breathtaking scope and aggression. Set to take effect on April 2nd, the order didn't just target a single adversary, it targeted an adversary's customers. The order imposed a crushing 25% secondary tariff on all goods imported from any country that imported Venezuelan oil. While the policy was nation agnostic on paper, its true target was singular and unambiguous: China. At the time, Chinese refiners were purchasing between 55% and 68% of Venezuela's total oil exports, amounting to roughly 500,000 barrels per day. The logic of Executive Order 142450 was a form of economic warfare by proxy. By punishing China for its dealings with Venezuela, the White House aimed to cripple the Venezuelan regime by strangling its primary source of income. It was a high-stakes gamble, using the leverage of America's vast consumer market to dictate the trading relationships of other sovereign nations. The administration was betting that faced with a 25% tax on all their exports to the U.S., Chinese companies would have no choice but to immediately sever their ties with Venezuela. As reported by Reuters and Business Insider, the announcement sent a shockwave of panic through Asian markets. The independent teapot refiners in China, who were major buyers of Venezuelan crude, were thrown into chaos, with traders frantically trying to cancel or reroute shipments already on the water. The order was designed to be a masterstroke of maximum pressure, but it failed to account for the intricate, interconnected nature of the global oil trade and the brutal physics of market reactions. The immediate reaction wasn't capitulation from China, but capitulation in the oil markets. Traders saw the move not as a clever geopolitical play, but as a suicidal attack on global demand. If the world's second-largest economy was about to be hit with massive tariffs, its appetite for energy would plummet. The result was a historic sell-off. The Chicago Mercantile Exchange reported a record trading volume of nearly 36 million contracts for West Texas Intermediate, WTI, crude in April, a frenzy of panic selling. The price of WTI, the benchmark for U.S. crude, cratered. On April 6th, it stood at $60.70 a barrel. Within 48 hours, it had crashed through the critical psychological support level of $60, closing at $59.58 on April 8th. For the highly leveraged shale oil industry, a world below $60 a barrel wasn't just unprofitable, it was a death sentence. The shockwave of the order, intended to hit Caracas and Beijing, had instead boomeranged back with stunning force, striking at the very heart of America's energy sector. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. With the world's biggest buyer effectively scared out of the market, demand for U.S. crude evaporated overnight. According to data from the Energy Information Administration, U.S. crude exports plummeted by an astonishing 637,000 barrels per day in a single week. The once bustling export terminals at ports like Corpus Christi fell silent. With nowhere to go, the oil backed up in the system. U.S. crude inventories swelled by 2.6 million barrels, reaching a dangerously high 442.3 million barrels. Pipelines around the crucial Houston Ship Channel warned of being overwhelmed. The American oil export machine, once a symbol of global dominance, had seized up completely. This created a golden opportunity for America's rivals, and they seized it with ruthless efficiency. OPEC Plus, the coalition of OPEC nations and Russia, saw the vacuum and flooded the market. They collectively increased production by 1.37 million barrels per day, offering their crude at a discount to desperate Asian and European refiners who had been suddenly cut off from their U.S. suppliers. At the major trading hub in Rotterdam, cargoes of Saudi and Russian oil were being offered at a nearly $2 discount to the Brent benchmark, a price significantly cheaper than crude from the Texas Permian Basin. In a matter of days, American oil, once the premium choice, was priced out of the international market by its own government's policy. The U.S. had not only shot itself in the foot, it had handed the gun to its biggest competitors. The chaos was reflected in the arcane but critical world of the futures market. The market structure flipped into a deep contango, the most pronounced in 2 years. This is a situation where the price for oil delivered in the future is significantly higher than the price for oil delivered today. The spread between the current month's contract and a contract for 4 months out widened to over $2 a barrel. While this is great news for traders with access to storage, they can buy cheap oil now, store it, and sell it for a guaranteed profit later. It's a disaster for producers. Shale companies, who are often heavily in debt and need constant cash flow to fund their drilling operations, were forced to sell their physical barrels into a market with no buyers, often at a steep discount, just to stay solvent. The market was sending a clear signal: stop producing. The financial architecture that supported the shale miracle was beginning to crumble under the weight of a self-inflicted crisis. This created a painful and immediate dilemma, pitting the political rhetoric of the White House against the economic reality in the oil patch. The administration was trapped. Having declared a trade war to punish its adversaries, it couldn't simply reverse the executive order without suffering a massive political humiliation. To do so would be to admit that the policy was a catastrophic failure. Yet, maintaining the policy meant presiding over the destruction of the very industry it had long championed as a symbol of American resurgence. For the shale producers in Texas, North Dakota, and New Mexico, the situation was even more stark. They faced a brutal choice: continue pumping oil at a loss to generate enough cash flow to service their debts, thereby contributing to the glut and pushing prices even lower, or shut down their rigs, lay off workers, and risk bankruptcy. There was no easy way out. The industry that had powered America's dream of energy independence was now caught in a vice, squeezed between a hostile global market and a hostile domestic policy, with no relief in sight. The fallout from the price crash was not an abstract economic event. It was a human catastrophe that unfolded across the American heartland. In the boomtowns of the Permian Basin, like Midland and Odessa, the dream evaporated overnight. High-paying, six-figure jobs that had attracted workers from across the country vanished. As reported by Reuters, industry forums lit up with stories of crews being laid off with no warning. The Baker Hughes rig count, a key barometer of industry health, recorded the loss of 3 active drilling rigs in a single week, the largest drop since 2022. This wasn't just a temporary downturn, it was a full-blown crisis of confidence. Financial analysts warned that, with WTI prices stuck below $60 a barrel, the economics of shale oil simply didn't work. The break-even point for many new wells was higher than the market price, meaning any new investment would be a money-losing proposition. Capital markets, the financial lifeline of the industry, slammed shut. The cascade effect was brutal. It wasn't just the drillers who suffered, it was the truck drivers who hauled water and sand, the caterers who fed the crews, the hoteliers who housed them, and the local businesses who depended on their spending. The shale revolution had brought unprecedented prosperity to these regions, and its collapse brought equally unprecedented pain, dismantling communities that had been built on the promise of American energy. For consumers in both the United States and Canada, the situation was maddeningly counterintuitive. The price of crude oil was collapsing, yet the price at the pump remained stubbornly high and in some cases even increased. In the U.S., the average price for a gallon of gasoline hovered around $3.20, refusing to reflect the crash in the underlying commodity. The reason was a painful lesson in supply chain logistics. While American crude was cheap and plentiful, it was trapped inland. Refineries on the coasts, which are configured to process different types of crude and serve major population centers, suddenly lost access to their expected foreign oil imports due to the global shipping chaos. To keep operating, they were forced to buy more expensive alternative barrels from places like Brazil or Algeria. This higher input cost completely erased any benefit from cheaper domestic shale oil, and the difference was passed directly onto the consumer at the pump. Moody's issued a stark warning. Every 10-cent increase in the price of gasoline sucks approximately $1 billion a month out of the pockets of American consumers, hitting retail sales, restaurants, and overall economic activity. Canadian consumers faced a similar fate. As part of a highly integrated North American energy market, their gasoline prices are heavily influenced by the same chaotic market dynamics, leaving them paying more even as the headline price of oil fell. It was the worst of all worlds, an industry in crisis, workers losing their jobs, and families paying more for essential energy. And so, North America stands at a crossroads it never anticipated. An attempt to use American energy as a political weapon resulted in a self-inflicted wound of historic proportions. The shale industry, once a symbol of American ingenuity and dominance, was pushed to the brink of collapse, not by foreign adversaries, but by a presidential decree. The crisis exposed the profound risks of weaponizing commerce in a deeply interconnected world, demonstrating that no nation, not even a superpower, is immune to the laws of the market. The promise of energy independence has been overshadowed by the reality of economic chaos. In the race to define the future, will North America win together, or will both sides lose trying to go it alone? Are you American or Canadian? Share your story and your perspective in the comments below.